This is, it says season 2 on it. Hey, what's up? It's Dallas, and it is time for another vlog. I'm in my basement, and over the last couple days, I have spent the majority of my time in this basement and also on our main floor with my co-writers Ryan Swanson and Tyler Thompson because we have been working on plotting out season 2. This is where we were for season 1 as well. 2 years ago, we got together and plotted out season 1 and wrote out an outline, and then what we do is we then take where we're going at the end of the season. We always try to figure that out first. We work our way backwards, and we make sure that we don't go too fast, that we take our time to develop these characters. And it's amazing how many things from season 1 that were birthed from this 2-day retreat in our basement. And that's what we're hoping happens in season 2, because I'm really excited about what we came up with. And we know where season 2 is going to end. Behind me, you see like posters of my old movies. You're also probably trying to catch a glimpse of what I've written on some of these white sheets. And I can just tell you that I've crossed out a few things that may be too much of spoilers. And then the other things that we've left on there are things we're not even really all that sure about. So if you're hoping to get some spoilers, they're not that big of a deal. This is The Ride. This is the first short film I ever did at my church. And that's actually what got us in the mood to do more short films. And so that was kind of the beginning of a lot of this. But more than anything else, this is the poster for what was at the time called Once We Were Slaves. It's now called The Two Thieves, and you can get it on Amazon. Just look up The Two Thieves. This is where the chosen world first began. I did a short film about the crucifixion from the perspective of the two thieves on the cross, and this is when I met Jonathan Rumi, who played Jesus for the first time, and that's when I said to myself, oh my goodness, this guy's the best Jesus I've ever seen. Written by Tyler Thompson and Dallas Jenkins. That's when Tyler and I were really working together on these projects. And we're going to be doing an interview with Tyler by the end of this video, where you're going to get to meet him for the first time and hear his perspective. He's the one who wrote the famous line, I once was one way and now I'm completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him. A lot of the great lines, a lot of the great storylines in these shows came from Tyler. So you're going to get to meet him, hear his backdrop, and also some of his favorite scenes in the show. Real quick, while we're on the topic of our show and videos, please click the subscribe button. Please click the notification bell. They're right under the video. That allows you to know whenever we do new videos and when you like and comment and share. YouTube really likes it a lot and gets our videos out to more people. So thanks for doing that. Hometown Legend, my very first movie I ever made. What If, feature film that I directed that still is actually doing really well. Really proud of that film. This is, it says season 2 on it. And behind this, which I can't show you too much of, is a bunch of info about characters, about episodes. This is where we were keeping track of the big picture. And so what we're going to do over the next couple of days is write the outline, and then the scripts start to get written. And so that's going to be kind of taking up our lives for the next several months. As we are trying to promote season 1, we're also trying to get ahead on season 2 so that if and when we're actually able to get the financing for season 2, we can just get right into it and not have to wait for scripts to be written. So we're getting a head start on that. And that came from you purchasing DVDs and streaming packages for season 1, along with some of the fundraising of season 1, allowed us to have the means to be able to write the next 8 scripts of season 2. So thank you for that. Keep supporting this show in any way that you can, because it allows us to keep that momentum going. Speaking of keeping momentum going, we had a live stream earlier this week, Thursday night, and this is actually, my wife's going to be horrified that I'm showing you this. We made this makeshift studio, and this is where I sat right in this chair right here, and that's where we did a live stream for the pre-orders of season 1, episodes 5 through 8. So we're selling the entire season 1 complete set, which has the Christmas special on it about the birth of Christ. It has the 8 biblical roundtables, and it also has a few more behind-the-scenes things, plus English and Spanish subtitles. And we're also selling 5 through 8 individually, but we did a pre-order. We launched a pre-order event on Thursday night. We're not going to give exact numbers, but it was incredible how many of you joined us and pre-ordered. The excitement about this show is really starting to take off, and it really means a lot. And it's showing us that there's a lot more to come, and it's giving us a ton of confidence to know that some of our plans that we've got coming up are going to work. We've got another live stream coming up. Make sure you stay attuned to those so that you can keep track of big announcements that we've got, because we're going to be doing a live stream every week this month of November. So that's what's been happening this last week. I'll give you one bit of kind of spoilerish info about season 2. I'm not going to give you too many specifics, but we're going to be getting away from a little bit kind of hitting all these big miracles that we hit in episodes 5 through 8. You know, if episodes 1 through 4 were kind of a setup for these characters, episodes 5 through 8 start to get really into some of the big and famous stories of the Gospels. Season 2 is going to be a lot about gathering even more of the team. You're going to see some new characters. You're going to also start to really see these relationships develop. Matthew and Simon especially don't like each other, but now they're forced to be together. How is that going to work out? Those kinds of things are really what we're going to explore, the relationships between these people, because we've seen Jesus projects before, but we haven't seen a whole lot about the relationships of the disciples, because we believe that if you can see Jesus through the eyes of those who actually met him, you can be impacted in the same way they were. So when we're thinking about the life of the show, trying to think ahead 5, 6, 7 seasons, we have to do our part to make sure that we don't run out of momentum, that we're not just first couple seasons just chock full of all these big, huge moments, and then it feels like future events are almost anticlimactic, and the show just never has a chance to breathe. And so season 2 is going to really give us a chance to breathe, give you a chance to breathe, and get to know these characters even more. That's really important when you're writing, is to not get too ahead of yourself or to get too behind yourself, which means that you're focused so much on what's just in front of you that you can sometimes paint yourself into a corner. And then all of a sudden you realize, oh gosh, we have nowhere to go. And so we try to plot ahead. We try to know where we're going future seasons. We try to know where we're going at the end of the season. And then of course we try to know where we're going at the end of each episode. So what I'm going to show you now is an interview with my co-writer, Tyler Thompson. Tyler and I have been good friends for a while, and he's been a partner with me on a lot of this stuff. So you're going to get a chance to meet him. Just so you know, we had a few technical issues during our interview. So there's a few points where we just cut around it. So forgive me in advance for some of those. The connection wasn't perfect, but the interview looks good, sounds good for the most part. And I think you'll really get a lot out of it. All right, so I've got with me Tyler Thompson, who's an old friend of mine. You and I have known each other for coming up on 10 years, right? We met in 2010. Mm-hmm. So I got a job at Harvest Bible Chapel in Chicago. I was coming there to make movies, but in the meantime, when I first got there, they were wanting me to also help boost the video department, and you were one of the lead editors on the video team at that time. And so that's how you and I met. You were actually working for me in the video team. And for the first couple of years, I remember our goal was we wanted to make the best church videos in the country. That was our goal. And we did a lot of great things over those couple of years. You left and got another job a few years into it, but you and I actually did the bulk of our work together, kind of our biggest projects after you left. The very first short film that we ever did that launched, in a sense, the whole concept behind The Chosen was The Two Thieves. You and I wrote the script for The Two Thieves, and that's where we began our writing process. So you're a historian, a bit of a Bible historian, a bit of a regular historian, and also a bit of a poet, spoken word guy. You hadn't written any scripts before, but you wrote the first couple drafts and outlines of The Two Thieves. And that's when we started this whole concept of doing Bible stories, Jesus stories from different perspectives. What's your background in this? Like, where did you get your love for history, your knowledge of history? You're the guy I typically run things past. You seem to have a great affinity for Jewish history, biblical traditions and cultural backgrounds. And so whenever you and Ryan and I get together to write The Chosen, you're the guy who tends to be the most knowledgeable about some of these historical things. Where did that come from? What's a little bit of your background in that?
Yeah, so I actually studied ancient Near Eastern literature at Moody and languages. So I did quite a bit of study in Hebrew, and then a lot of study of both the Old Testament and other like cognate literature from the time before Christ. So things like the Gilgamesh, a lot of the like Greek tragedies by like Euripides, Sophocles. Those stories were sort of like the Marvel superhero movies of their time. Everyone saw those plays. They knew those characters. So I had studied all of that. And yeah, you remember actually when we wrote The Two, we originally wanted to do it in Hebrew. And I don't know if you remember, but I worked with a Hebrew scholar at Moody to translate the entire script, and we made like phoneticized recordings. And in the end, it was just too tough. It kind of didn't work out.
We were actually going to do it in Aramaic.
Yeah, sorry, it was in Aramaic. That's right. Yeah.
And the actors were tried for about a day and just said, nope, not going to happen. Yeah, we were always trying to do things a little bit outside the box. Yeah. I think that's another thing that's really interesting about you is, again, you have a love of tradition, a love of history, but yet we're always trying to kind of introduce people to something that's outside the box and do it in new ways. So The Two Thieves was about the two thieves on the cross and kind of seeing the crucifixion from their eyes. Then after that, we did kind of every year, we would do some sort of vignette or short film, typically about the life of Christ in some way, something that people haven't seen before. and in a way that hadn't seen before. And that led ultimately to The Shepherd, which was the short film that we did about the birth of Christ from the perspective of the shepherds. And I remember when I told you that idea, typically this is our process. I have an idea. I go to you to help execute it, because I usually have the ending, and I have kind of the emotional part worked out. I come to you, you give all the backstory, you help make it work in the first couple drafts. You usually do something that's way too flowery and poetic and almost unintelligible for the common person, because you're too smart for the common person and too smart for me. And then I usually take it down just a notch, and we find this happy medium. What I want to know about that love of poetry for you. You love metaphor, you love symbolism, something that Protestants typically avoid. You tend to kind of fall in the middle between Catholicism and Protestantism in terms of your love of imagery, because I keep saying different P words. Protestants tend to be focused solely on words and the literal. And we've always talked about how Catholics are a little bit more flamboyant in their imagery. You're a little bit in the middle. Where does that come from? Have you always been a bit of an artist at heart?
Yeah, I mean, I always felt drawn to things like statues, architecture. I remember when I first got my license and I could drive. I grew up in a small town, like in the middle of a cornfield in central Illinois. And I remember when I first got my license, one of the first things I did was start driving to the nearest city, which was Peoria. And I would actually stop into Catholic cathedrals just to see the inside, because I liked seeing stained glass and like the image, pictures like the Stations of the Cross, because I grew up in a tradition where there was no decorations in the church at all, not even a cross, because I think they maybe thought it was temptation toward like idolatry or something.
What most people consider to be the most impactful line in the entire first season of The Chosen came from Mary Magdalene talking to Nicodemus. And I've told people that we were down in this very basement that I'm in right now. This is where we spent the last couple of days working on the outlining of season 2. This is where 2 years ago, it was around Halloween of 2 years ago, that we plotted out season 1. And that was when we were talking about the Nicodemus Mary Magdalene conversation. And it was very typical how we work. The idea to have them talk was mine. You started coming up with ideas, and you specifically said, what if she just said these words?
I was one way, and now I am completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him.
And I immediately started crying, and I said, yes, that's going to be in the script. And that was, and it had the exact impact that I thought it would. Lines like that they come to you a lot. Like you typically, if people were watching the series, some of the most flowery dialogue, and I don't even say that dismissively, but some of the lines that are a little bit more poetic come from you. Do they come right? Like, did that line come right away? Or is that something that you've had in mind for something different and then it applied here? Where does that come from, that sense of poetry, and that line in particular?
Well, I think first it comes from spending a lot of time actually reading the parts of scripture that are poetic. So a lot of the Psalms, a lot of the like wisdom literature, like Ecclesiastes. For whatever reason, I've always had kind of a morbid fascination with the prophets, like Isaiah. And I say morbid in the sense that like a lot of times they're talking about pretty dark stuff. I don't know if it's just my temperament, but so part of it is those are really poetic. And so if you immerse yourself in those words all the time, then it becomes easy to just kind of like transmute them or translate them into dialogue. I read a lot of poetry, a lot of volumes of poetry. I don't actually write. You keep referring to me as poetic. I don't actually write poetry. I write like elevated language. But some of my best friends are poets, and I like to go listen. I live in Chicago, and I like to go listen to their performances. They're usually in like kind of dimly lit spaces, where I always feel like I'm like huddled in my jacket in the corner. But I listen to a lot of it. I read a lot of it, but no, that line I wasn't planning for something else. What's interesting about that line in that moment is I remember you saying, she can't tell him. She doesn't know his name and she doesn't know what happened. And we were trying to solve the problem of like, how can she describe something that she doesn't understand? It was just problem solving. It's like, what do you say about something that you don't understand? And all you can say is like, I just remember I was one way and now I'm different. And the thing in between was I met this person and I don't understand him. I don't understand what happened to me, but like all I can present are the facts. And so that's kind of how that came to be.
Yeah, it was so awesome. And then the other key moment that Ryan has talked about in another video that we did was Simon. I think it's similar in terms of when Simon's out on the boat and he's yelling at God. And that scene at that moment was just Simon trying to fish, and we didn't have a whole lot more. And Ryan really felt like we needed some level of expression from Simon about where he was at. And you delivered that speech that Simon gave, which is chock full of Jewish history. Again, I wasn't part of that process that time. How did that come about? Is that, again, just from your love of history? Did you start kind of combing through the Old Testament looking for the greatest hits of when the Jews were the most screwed over, as it were, and you just kind of put those through? How does something like that come together?
Well, I've always loved history and historical films, but the sad fact about Jewish history is you don't really have to look very far or study very long to notice a pattern of like exile and return, a pattern of like oppression and then like hiding, or a pattern of even terrorism and then being scattered. That's just like cyclical, and in some ways, some of that still goes on today to a lesser extent. So I think it was pretty easy to just like you said, sort of flip back through scripture and be like, here's every time that it seemed like they didn't feel very chosen. Yeah. And it was, I don't remember when you came up with the name for the show, but obviously we already knew that was the name of the show. And it was the first time I think that we used the word chosen in the script. Viewers will see that we use the term chosen one more time at the end of the series in a very special scene that I'm really excited to spring on a very unsuspecting audience.
Right. What's the scene that was your favorite when you were writing it? And then what's the scene that when you watched it in episodes 1 through 8, you were emotionally moved, or you kind of felt objective about it and thought, wow, if I was watching this and had no connection to this show, I would love this?
When everyone is having multiple Passover dinners. And I think originally I had, in my original first draft, something like that was in episode 1. And you and Ryan totally scrapped it appropriately, like it didn't fit. But we kind of moved it to the end of episode 2. And I was really proud of it when we wrote it. I loved the idea of seeing all these different families and people in different stages of their life, of their crisis, of their arc, celebrating this really sacred ritual together. But then when I saw it and it really happened, I was like, that works. And that was one of my ideas that we all worked on together. So I was super excited about that. And then your other question you said was, what was my favorite thing to write, like when I was working on it before I saw it?
Yeah, just if there was something that you just really loved digging into, whether it was an episode or a character or a scene that you were like, this is really fun for me. I was hoping to dig into this.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you 2 stories. The first one is something that was the most interesting to delve into, and that is in episode 1, the exorcism scene. When Nicodemus walks into that room, I thought, what in the world is he going to say? There's no record in the Bible. There are no written transcripts of an exorcism. They're mentioned, but what they were said isn't talked about. And so I had to really look through history. I had to look through old rabbinic documents and really kind of get underneath some of the seedier parts of history and of religion. What do people say to demons? Like a lot of the Catholic Church has protected like what they say, like people kind of don't, it's all secret. So I remember I got up really early one morning, it was like 5 a.m. and I spent the whole morning just delving through exorcism rites and grabbing the pieces that I thought would sound good. And I guess I just looked kind of pale because I'd been reading these really dark kind of texts, So that was the most interesting thing to delve into. And then this is such a small moment. Are we talking about 1 through 4 or the whole series at this point?
The whole series, sure.
Yeah. Something that I just loved writing, and when I saw that it made it past both you and Ryan, like you guys both signed off on it, was there's a moment in episode 5 when Mary asks Thaddeus how he came to know Jesus. And I wrote a story, because we don't know how Thaddeus was called. Tradition says that he may have been a tradesman. So I built an idea off of that and had him describing something that happens in stonemasonry. And we were able to connect it to something else that was happening in the story, which is not, it's like kind of you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube moment, although they wouldn't use that metaphor. So we use another metaphor. So I don't want to give anything away, but when viewers see that scene at the wedding in Cana, and they hear Thaddeus talking about his life. I was totally alive when I was writing that, and excited to try to merge those worlds, you know?
Yeah, that was exciting. And to make that work, yeah, that's right in episode 5. It's during one of the most important moments in the entire Gospels. And so that's, I think, an example of what we're trying to do that's different. Instead of just portraying the scenes from the Gospels, one right after another, literally as they happened, we're interweaving them a little bit with character and bringing in some context to them that hopefully will enhance people's love of them. So when I look back over the last 5-6 years of how much you and I have put into some of these smaller vignettes for the sake of for a relatively small number of people, it's got to feel pretty cool for you now to see some of those ideas now come to fruition and be seen by, literally hundreds of thousands of people over the course of the next, hopefully, many years. And soon we're going to be announcing the opportunity for this show to be given to the world and to be provided all around the world in different languages. And it starts right here in this room behind me. But it ultimately started several years ago with you and me just sitting down and going, all right, how do we tell the story that you and I have heard hundreds of times and seen dozens of times in a way that's never been seen before? So I hope you've gotten as much out of it as I have, because it's been fun to kind of be a part of.
Yeah, it's been really cool. I was thinking the other day in church, the minister was saying that one of the callings of Christians is that we have to keep telling God stories. We have to keep telling Jesus stories. And for some people, that means like what has happened in their life. And we certainly people do that. But it's cool that we are kind of going back and continuing to tell God stories, continuing to tell Jesus stories, just as we kind of imagine that they might have gone. And so I think that that's really cool, and it's been fun. So I'm looking forward to whatever happens next.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, thanks so much, Tyler. And to you, the viewer, keep enjoying these interviews we're going to be doing each week. I'll be bringing someone else from the cast or crew on to talk about going deeper into The Chosen. Thanks so much for checking us out.